Councilmember Adams-Zach, did you want to speak first, or Mark? Maybe we should have Mark Crystal prioritize what he thinks we can do this year.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, Mark Crystal and Paul.
Yeah.
If you have to do something, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine, Diane. Yeah, exactly. And again, getting back to that spreadsheet that says 22 to 24 on there, there are some time sensitive things, like example number one, the support work we need to utilize to support those contracts I mentioned in the PowerPoint, the lining projects, the manhole re-up projects. Those are happening, so that $1 million, that number one item to me is a must.
So that's sewer shed 4, 8, 9, correct?
Yes, and there should be a 10 on there too, Diane. That's a typo.
Oh,
so 4, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. So that's, again, that would have been bonded through our drainage district. I'm sorry, our sanitary sewer district. So again, it's just a matter of flipping the funds that way. Same thing with the next item. That's 6.4. I know it's a big item, but again, we were looking at potentially having to bond that to get charged against our sewer district, because like I mentioned earlier, that is mandated. We have to do this study. And then, we have other grants and funds tied to this study that we need to report back to the state and see how these connections go. Again, this is a moving target. There's a lot of pieces with this, but once again, it's either going to have to happen through ARPA or we're going to have to bond that. This is a must have, because again, we're mandated to do that. Okay, so that's 6.4. I know it's a big item, but again, that's a must that we need to do either one way or another. The next item, again, the upgrades of the stations. Again, to Brian Nowak's point, Councilmember Nowak's point, he was in there last week and seen him. Again, it's something that it's a need. And am I going to spend all 1.2 this year? Probably not. By the time we assess it and get in there, it's going to be spent over a period of probably 2 years, maybe 3. But that's also a real number that, again, I think is a need we're going to have to do. The Mildred Andres piece, again, it's 1.75. Like I used the analogy before, there is 2 large systems. The entire north side of town, everything north of Genesee Street flows through those 2 lines to our main pump station. They are huge traps. They're outdated. They need to go. It's going to make us much more efficient, help us upstream with bypasses and things of that nature that we have to report. Yes, it's a large item, but we are now at the point that we can remove those because we're at that point in our lining process. So once again, it's going to have to be done either through this or through a bond. The equipment, I'll leave it at that. I think it speaks for itself. The next item, the full depth road. Again, Wallace and Lemoyne, I'd like to tackle them this year. The other items, Raymond and the Southwest section, which total about $6 million, that wouldn't happen to 2023 and 2024 respectively. If we want to put those on hold, that's fine, and we can debate that, whether ARPA is still available, or if we want to get back to our annual highway/sewer bonds for that work down the road. And the other items to me, again, are also important. We had drainage issues in the Transit Hill area. That was either going to be done here or on our annual drainage bond. I did send an attachment, not to throw a lot of information at you guys and muddy the waters here, on my email on Friday, which basically shows, where we've been the last few years and where we have go, or where we intend to be. What I mean by that is we do basically a 5-year infrastructure plan. So Brian Krause has the ability to project out for debt service, what we can afford to bond, what we might want to do internally through fund balances. So if you look, again, I attached the last 5 years, which was from 16 to 20, and then the new 5 years, which is from 21 to 25. And if you notice in there for 2022, we projected bonding 3.5. Okay. But that allows us to back out some dollars to, again, help us on our tax base. So again, that $1 million is a need. We got to mitigate that flooding there. Again, do we want to take it on ARPA? Do we want to bond it? That's up to discussion. We can talk about that. And the park upgrades themselves, at least the first item, the town park work, I mean, that's something that we can get moving on right away. Once again, I think the pathways, the pictures speak for themselves. I mean, again, Joe can speak to that more than I can, but even us, the time that we use it in Spark, we're always getting requests for more playground amenities, more things that, that the kids can utilize. So I think that's a good thing. The splash pads, again, we can open up the conversation down the road. That's 1.1 that, again, we can discuss in the next few weeks, next few months, if we want to go down that road or not. But again, that's something that, again, has been discussed. That's why I added it to this potential list. So long story short, there's about 7.1 million that we can take off of there for future debate, which, puts that number closer to 15 million instead of 22.6. But the rest of those items, minus those three I mentioned, are probably, we're going to have to do one way or another. It's just a matter of, do we want to utilize ARPA, or do we want to go back to the potential bonds that we have out there or would have to put out there through our highway district and our sanitary sewer district?
All right, it's Diane Benchkowski. I just want to mention is, because Brian Kraus and we've taken so many of these webinars with this ARPA funding. And let's just keep in mind that those are easy if it's for sewers and drainage. Those are covered under the ARPA. So, and all that equipment, we could make a case for all those equipment purchases. Correct, Brian Kraus?
Yes, I agree. I mean, anything, mostly sewer. I mean, that was the main, topic of the ARPA funding. There's obviously other ways to spend it, but those are probably our biggest dollars and our biggest needs related to our town capital items.
Well, and then you do have to account for that, audit that, quarterly or twice a year?
Yeah, so I have to report quarterly. There's one due at the end of this month that is going to be my first one. The only thing we've spent so far is on that sewer vector truck. So should be relatively simple. I have to, learn the process because it's all brand new, but I've logged in today and started fumbling around on it. But yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this in the past, and I think that's what Diane's getting to, is that, the larger the project, probably the easier it is to account for all this stuff than to have 50 different smaller projects will be very challenging to do accounting for.
And that shouldn't be like when we get audited. If it's sewer, it's just a category of its own: sewer, water, and broadband. So this stuff should fit into most of this DEC stuff, at least the equipment purchases for sewer and the storm sewer upgrades.
Yes.
What do the other council members feel?
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. My concern is if we do this meeting style like this with ARPA funds, that as we present, we're going to start earmarking more and more money towards different projects. And if we have, for example, now 7.9 million left after we identify these high need areas, and then we address Paul's areas, which is another 1.9 million, we're going to have like I said, 7.9 million left. And then as people present more and more and we start earmarking funding towards it, whoever's presenting less, there might not be any funds left to address their needs. So I don't know if there's a better way for us to address this, maybe at once as a whole project, or just designate a meeting strictly ARPA, and everybody's at the table for it.
Can I just chime in? I think what we just have to tell Mark Crystal what he can start on for 2022. Not everything. He didn't say everything on this list, but he mentioned the priorities, which was the sanitary. Number one was the 1 million, the 6.4 million, the 1.25 for the upgrades to the lift stations, maybe over 2 to 3 years. So maybe he could start half of that.
Well, I think, Diane, and I think this is probably the sewers are the most critical part at this point in time. That should get us out somewhere anywhere at 50, 60, 70 years. It's going to benefit people that aren't even born yet. And we start splitting all this money up, chopping it up here and there. It's going to be very difficult, like Brian Krause had said, for all of this. And we're also up against a consent order. We don't know what the DEC is going to send us 6 months from now or a year from now. And this is only my opinion. I think probably at least half of the money we've got should go to the sewers.
At least, because let's not forget the residents, this is a quality of life, are experiencing this flooding, and they need this done too. So
Absolutely.
And the consent order. So I think these mandatory things, the consent order, and we talked about North Transit Woods neighborhood for the storm sewer upgrades, and also the Wallace and Lemoyne area.
And those have been ongoing problems for years.
Yes.
When we talked about this last year, I mentioned that I'm committed to working with the supervisor on dealing with the flooding concerns. She just mentioned Wallace and Lemoyne, and I agree with her on that. I think that's one of the things we've got to really prioritize. The lift and the pump stations, there's 60, 70, 80-year-old equipment in these places. I think that 1.2 has got to be a big priority. And, when we do things like we're talking about on Mildred and in some of the other areas, we're going to change the flows of water. So we're going to have to deal with all of this stuff in terms of lift and pump. I think that's got to be a big priority. I'd like to see us deal with Town Park. I mean, it gets a lot of foot traffic. A lot of people use it. And the price tag on those trails there is about 600,000, but with the playground in that, that would go a long way towards improving quality of life for a lot of people in town. And it needs to work. And you talk about wanting to get people outside, and you're dealing with viruses like COVID. When they're outdoors, it's a lot better than being congregated inside, watching television, playing video games, being in front of the computer, doing whatever you will. That'll reduce transmission to encourage people to be outdoors. You can really justify the need for that.
I agree with you, and possibly do one of the splash pads this year. And then we'll see what's, because I think it's around 500,000 for each splash pad. And I know, they were closed. Dingens was closed for 2 years in a row. This is an effect from COVID. So we can make that argument also that it's a negative effect regarding the pandemic. So
I don't know if I would put that on the splash pad as like one of the highest priorities. I mean, I'd like to see the projects that Mark has mentioned that are essential to our infrastructure be taken care of.
Without the infrastructure, the pools are not going to matter.
True.
that's fine.
I think if you look at an aerial view of the town, I would say the biggest risk in an airplane crash would probably be drowning by winding up in somebody's pool. No matter where you look, there are pools everywhere. And personally, I've even talked to my grandkids. Kids do not like splash pads, whether you believe it or not. It's great for the really little kids, but kids who want to swim and have fun with their buddies, splash pads aren't going to fly.
Well, we would still keep Town Park pool, of course. That's our biggest pool.
Right.
Yeah, but
right.
didn't we just revamp the little pool for the younger kids in Town Park?
Yes, but what I'm saying is we still have Dingens and Maryvale, and every year that goes by that they're not either, they're not used for 2 years in a row. So either the repair is going to be more money, or we start replacing those two. Brian Pilarski, splash.
I'm a huge supporter of these splash pads here. I mean, you're going to see a return on investment there and a cost savings. I mean, first of all, we have trouble hiring lifeguards. Second of all, the cost to maintain them and just for normal daily operations between pool chemicals, to pay the lifeguards, all that. You put a splash pad in there, your liability goes down. In addition to that, they can be used by all, swimmers, non-swimmers. So, I mean, we can go all day on this. I'm a supporter of splash pads. So, I mean, my main point on this is I think they're all needed projects, every single one of them on that list, and every one that Paul presented. And I think every project that may be presented to us from other department heads, I just want to give everybody a fair shake to say, hey, these are our needs as well. And yeah, maybe it's a matter of us sitting down and saying, hey, at least half of it goes towards sewers. That makes sense. We have to do it one way or another. I just don't want to see somebody who's presenting less and say, hey, there's only $100,000 left of ARPA funding and your requests are, $500,000. I just want to see a fair shake and that we hear everybody out. After that, how things are prioritized, I think that comes down to the board as a whole to make that decision. But splash pads, I mean, I'm all for that. I think that's a great idea.
Well, can we at least tell Mark Crystal to get started on items 1, 2, half of 3, because he said it would take 2 to 3 years. 4, the equipment, we should start ordering some of that stuff, whether we use ARPA or not. But we need that equipment, I assume, and the packers are an issue, I will tell you right now. And those, we still didn't get the one from last year. So that's going to be another year down the road.
He's got to get
Getting
ordering
further
this
out of
stuff.
date.
I had 2 people talking. Jerry, you want to go first?
Well, you know what, being involved in it, Diane, and it's like I said, everybody, well, I can't say anybody waited too long. Even in my own business, I just got a notice yesterday. If I order a truck body right now today, I will not get it till the end of 2023 at the earliest. There's a shortage of the chemicals for the foam that they use in truck bodies, insulation, everything. Of course, it's outsourced offshore. The truck dealers, a lot of them can't even guarantee truck deliveries anymore. I don't see it getting any better at this point in time. I know Mark Crystal and I had talked about this, everything from sewer pipe to you name it, it's getting scarcer by the day. And it's like I said, I understand the luxuries and everything, but I think we have to prioritize this as far as necessities go. And it's like I said, I don't think anybody knows, Freightliner or anybody else, when that truck is going to get delivered. And if we order another one, it could be 2 to 3 years out yet. As much as it doesn't make any sense to a lot of people, it's getting worse.
So can we at least tell Mark Crystal some, because he has to start these notice to bidders.
Right. I agree.
Right. Got to get started
So-
on it.
I think the sewer systems should be his main priority right now.
Yes, and the drainage.
And the drainage. I think that should be his main priority.
And those 2 road reconstructions on Wallace and Lemoyne. We promised those residents, I think that everybody agreed. I shouldn't say promised, but the town board agreed those were urgent areas that needed to be addressed.
And I
Supervisor,
think
Councilmember
highway has got the
Jazinski
pipe
has
for
his
those.
hand raised.
Yep.
Councilmember Jazinski has his hand raised to
Oh,
speak.
I didn't see that. Yes, I can't see. It's not in a grid, so I can't see.
Yeah.
Can you put it into a grid form, perhaps?
That's your own view. You have to
At the bottom on
manipulate
your
that yourself.
toolbar. You
Well,
take your
not when you
cursor
have
and
the
bring
shared
it down.
screen.
Bring your cursor down. You'll see it.
Yeah. Well, okay, go ahead, council member.
So I believe that everything we're talking about is absolutely imperative for human life. But what we're missing out, in my opinion, is human life. The number 1 cause of death of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45 are opioid addiction. So, I mean, when's the last time anybody's been to the park and looked at these parks and seen these needles everywhere and stuff? So reading into this, a rescue plan, it does have a part that, has a piece for mental health resources, including supplemental substance abuse. I think a portion of that should go for that. Because what's it matter if we fix everything if we're losing a generation of people?
Thank you, council member.
So
Anybody
since
else?
we have Mark Crystal on with us, I think our focus tonight is the sewers. That's the focus for tonight, since Mark Crystal's on the line with us, and he needs to know what he can put
Right.
a
I
bid
think
out
the
on.
focus tonight is how we're gonna appropriate funds for ARPA. I believe
Correct.
Mark Crystal's reasons are totally imperative. I get it,
Absolutely.
but human life is important too. And as I
I
said,
completely understand that, Mike, and I'm not no way or no shape undermining human life, believe you me. But all I'm saying is, unfortunately, tonight, we need to make a decision on part of that money, and that is for the engineering department. I'm not saying we're using all that money, but at this present moment, we need to make a decision on part of that money so that Mark Crystal knows what to put a bid out on. That's all I'm saying.
no, I agree, Christine. I think we should appropriate funds for that, but I don't want to lose sight of what's most
Absolutely not.
important. And that's
No, we
human
will
life.
not lose sight of that.
So we've got the total was 26 and some change million from ARPA funds, and something we've all got to keep in mind, and I know we all know this, is the town has spent some of these already and appropriated them for some projects. So we don't even have the full 26.2. The red number on the screen shows 22.6. I know the idea in the discussion earlier tonight, the idea of bonding was brought up to cover some funds. This 22.6 is all proposed to come out of ARPA funds, correct?
Yes, I mean, let me, I'm gonna jump in a little bit here too, because, so the total award is $25,316,853. So, I have put a preliminary list together of a lot of things that not only that Mark Crystal and Paul Pivovarsky put together, but things that, yes, are in process. There are certain things that we did say that we'd pay for out of the operating fund this year related to IT items that we have to recognize will be part of these ARPA funds. And I totally agree with, I mean, almost everything you guys are saying is all very factual and very right to the point. We have $25.3 million that we need to spend, and you need to prioritize how you want to spend it. You know, as Diane had mentioned, a good portion of the potential spending, you know, can be done on sewers. If we don't spend this money on some sewers, we're going to have to bond it, and so that will have an impact on the budget as debt service will increase related to that stuff. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you the facts. So, you know, and so getting back to the point of, yeah, I put a list of things together. The items that are listed do value larger than the actual $25.3 million. So, Brian and all you guys are correct from the standpoint of you need to figure out how to prioritize it at some point. I do agree with, you know, we need to get moving on some of the sewer stuff. And in my opinion, I mean, this is sewer stuff that we have to spend this money, whether you spend it with these funds or with other bonded funds. So, I mean, quite honestly, you know, Mark needs to go forward one way or another. If you guys don't want to say we're going to spend it on ARPA, we got to start putting together debt, you know, bond resolutions for these types of things in order to make sure we're covered from that standpoint too. So obviously it's better to be able to make decisions sooner rather than later. But you know, I'm not going to tell you got to do anything specific.
Well, all right, so it's after 8. We still have our executive session, and we still have council member Adams that wants to speak about the firemen again. So we're going to have to wait till the next meeting and
I don't know if we should wait that long because everything
we-
is so backed up. I mean,
I
what is
agree.
the consensus of the board? Are we ready to tell Mark to go ahead and order or
I
not?
thought we were, but then other people said no. So we can't seem to come to a decision here.
Well, I think the
I'm
biggest thing
favor.
that maybe Mark needs to supply us with at this point in time, and I know firsthand the availability on some stuff is not good. My understanding that Mark may have even purchased some extra pipe, whatever. I don't really know, but maybe he can prioritize it for us that way to see what's available as far as whether it be sanitary sewer pipe, storm sewer pipe, fittings, or whatever. That'll give him an idea that he can pass on to us as far as what projects he can get started on first.
Exactly, Jerry. And to your point, I don't mean to jump in real quick, Jerry, to follow up on your point, I sent some emails out to the board back last fall, September-ish, exactly that. I mean, we saw it firsthand this past year. We saw the writing on the wall that, again, materials are going to become extremely hard to come by. So we had conversations. So to that point, we did pull the trigger on that. Okay. We ordered quite a bit of materials off a state contract, legally purchased, to make sure we have them come spring thaw. So come end of March, early April, we'll have materials ready to go. We got a trailer delivery today over at sewer maintenance. We got one 2 weeks ago. Then the snowstorm materials are starting to slowly trickle in. So I am confident, because we did pull the trigger back in November to make sure we have product for this spring. So we are in decent shape there as far as materials go.
Councilmember Jazinski? He has his hand raised.
I'm
Councilor
sorry.
Noah. Yeah, but I just maybe make a recommendation of what I think we should get started with this year. And this isn't to say these are the only things we should do or the most important things, but we've got the equipment purchases. That is about halfway down the screen. The full depth reconstruction for Wallace and Lemoyne. And then we've got the work in town park. I mean, if I had to pick three things, those would be the three things I would pick to get started with. We obviously need to do the consent order related things. And you've got the pumps, the sanitary with the pumps. I mean, there's four of them I think we can get started and moving along with there. The pump station stuff, Wallace and Lemoyne, the equipment purchases in town park, and we've got to do the consent order stuff. But we could talk about how much of that's covered with ARPA, and if we wanted to do any bonding to cover a piece of that, or if we can get grant funding or state assistance or whatever that may be. But and figure out how to finance that thing as we go along. But maybe those are the things we get started with, and maybe we could do one section of the DEC related work with the lateral connections and get that moving immediately, and then talk about how to deal with the other sections. Because if we're working on 500 connections right away, starting, let's say, this week, to start the process there, that gives us time to move along with the rest of them.
The pump station should be number one priority because we need potable water for the town. So I think that should absolutely be first on the list.
I agree, Councilman.
Brian, to
Okay,
your point, I think this is an appropriate way to handle it. So if again, you take three items off this list that we can discuss in the near future, which would be the Raymond Street construction, and then the southwest corner construction, and then the splash pads. I'm not saying that, I mean, again, they're on this list for a reason, but we take them off, that makes this list about 15.5 million. To Brian Krause's point, again, the consent order stuff we have to do. We can debate whether we want to fund it with this, partially with ARPA, all with ARPA, or a hybrid. But again, that 15.5 million, if you guys are comfortable with, let me start getting these bids out. Let's get this paperwork rolling. Let's get these things in motion. And again, once we go to award, it gives us a few weeks, a few months to basically figure out, okay, now are we still comfortable with this all in ARPA? Do we want to do a hybrid model of some bonding, some ARPA? But in my opinion, those $15.5 million worth of items, minus the three I mentioned, I'd like to get moving on. We can further discuss the end funding sites, but we need to get moving on that if we're going to be able to construct these things this season.
And quick question, Mark, with the sanitary sewer work, does it make more sense to bid all that in one shot instead of trying to pull out a piece in terms of getting the best bang for your buck? best unit costs, things like that.
Exactly, Brian. So if you go to that item 2, that big number, that $6.4 million item, okay, 5.4 million of that is going to be one bid. And the reason it's going to be one bid is, to your point, we're going to get a much better number. We've proven that in the past with our lining projects. If we go out with a sizable project, we're going to get a much better number for our purposes. Okay, so again, that's why I'd like to get this bid prepared, get it out before we award it. Let's say 6, 8, 9, 10 weeks from now, whatever it may be. We can then come back and say, okay, we do have the bids in for this work. It is 5.4 million. And in between then, to Councilmember Pilarski's point, maybe we can have other discussions with other members to figure out what the whole needs are. Then we can come back and say, hey, listen, yeah, we are going to take 5.4 million of ARPA, or it might be 3.4 million of ARPA, and we're going to do a $2 million bond. I don't know what the answer is, but again, I need to get these things out so we can keep the timeline moving. Because once again, these consent orders, keep in mind, we are on the clock with New York State DEC, and the clock ends at the end of 2024, which is around the corner. I mean, when you think about it, we got 3 years to complete the first chunk of this work. So I really don't want to lose any more time to make sure that we follow the letter of the law in the order, if you follow me.
I do, yeah. So just, I was thinking out loud. So taking this piecemeal and doing one part and then doing the rest later is not going to work. It's all or nothing.
Yeah, it pretty much. We can do a piecemeal, but I'm telling you, we're going to save anywhere from 15 to 20% by doing it in one piece. Okay, which I think is better off for us.
Yeah.
As a matter of perspective too, just to kind of, I guess, put it in perspective, you know, the $25 million grant, we wouldn't even come close to that number if we didn't spend some of this money on sewers. You know what I mean?
Right.
All these other things are, you know, 400,000 here, 200,000 there. They're dwarfed by these sewer costs. So while I do appreciate there are other ways to spend this money, and we certainly should consider those, we should definitely spend some of this money on sewers.
I agree.
And I'm going to take it a step further, Brian, to build on your point. Just a quick little back up here. You know, we did bond back in 16, $12 million, okay, to start the first phase of this consent order. And because we were aggressive and we jumped in it right away, it helped us achieve $35 million in grant opportunities, okay, which is a huge number for us. I can't guarantee it's going to happen again, but with this 6.4 million, again, we're going to jump in. I want to get out in front of it, show the state that we're committed. We're going to do it the right way. And again, I don't want to say beat other communities, but get it done before others do. So once again, I can't guarantee we're going to get it, but let's get in the front of the line once again for a next round of funding. So hopefully when the DEC comes back and says, okay, we saw your pilot, we want you to do A, B, C, D, and E, then we can reach out and hopefully get funding to help A, B, C, D, and E. But I can't do that unless we get out in front of it. It worked before. I can't guarantee it's going to work again, but I think it's definitely worth the shot, and we have to do it anyway. So let's be proactive and get out there.
I agree.
Are you confident we have the workforce to handle the workload?
Well, we've been doing it all this way for a while, Michael, and I'm confident as long as everything stays the same, we'll be fine. Yes, yep. But again, we need to get decisions made, you know, so we can get everything in line, in queue. Again, a lot of it's also going to dictate on Mother Nature, depending how long the winter season goes and how quick this winter season comes back again next year. But again, this thing is ebbs and flows and moves, but I'm confident what we mentioned here, we can get either in the ground or under construction before the season ends. Yes.
All right, can we move on then, Mark? So you know what the plan is, and we're gonna have to move on to Chris Adams Act, and then we can always, I think you need to start getting those notice to bidders together and.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine. Yep.
the ones that have to be done this year. Whatever, you know, I think that's what
Yeah.
the board's saying, and it doesn't mean we
Yeah.
have to use the ARPA funds. Whatever we're not gonna use, we're gonna have to find the money someplace else, so.
Exactly, Don. Yes. And even with getting the equipment bids out, to
Yeah.
Jerry Kaminsky's point, honestly, we might not see this stuff until the end of 24, maybe 25. So at that point in time, we might say, hey, listen, now what's the fund balance, this and everything. But again, we get it out there, we get our place in line, you know?
Right, and you want to get those notice to bidders so you can start these projects during the summer. And then the equipment, you know, you can do those after you do the notice parameters for the work that you have to do first.
Right, yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's do that, and then we'll talk about Paul's stuff at the next work session, but we still have to talk, we have to allow Christine Adamczak to talk. She's been asking, waiting patiently, so.
Oh, I just wanted to swing around and just talk about I can't remember what meeting it was. It might have been last year. Correct me if I'm mistaken, Councilmember Nowak, when we did talk about the ARPA funding for the fire districts.
Right, I think it was the first one in December, maybe the
Was
last
it?
one in December, but it was December or late November, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and some of the fire districts have reached out asking if any decision was made on the ARPA funding for their needs in the fire districts. So I was swinging around to see if there's any kind of update on the ARPA funding with their needs for the fire districts.
Personally, I would think that this is an area that needs to be part of the rest of the discussion of ARPA. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
like, if we need to say, okay, we're spending this much money on sewers, this is what's remaining. You know, where's our priorities, and do we want to spend any of it with the fire districts? And, you know, again, fire districts will become sub-recipients. It will become more administratively challenging because we got to make sure they're spending it the way they're supposed to. They have to report information to us, and we have to put it on our quarterly reports. So, I mean, I'm personally not a fan of it because of that, because of the administrative hassle. But I'm not saying that there's not a valid reason to give them some money.
So is there a way, and I totally agree with you, Brian, about the administration piece of it all and who's responsible for the equipment, because ultimately the town is, let's say, God forbid, we buy trailers or whatever, and they destroy them or something happens to them, we're ultimately responsible for that. Is there a way where we could purchase anything for the town that we would use within our police force and allow them to use it? Like a shared agreement or something in that nature? And I'm just picking the trailers because I know that was one thing they asked for.
It sounds like we could try to be creative that way. I mean, that's definitely an option. I mean, that's something to be explored.
There were 5 general ideas mentioned by the fire district when they presented this to us to get the conversation rolling here. The 2 that I like the most to put up for consideration were the AED project that they proposed, and they had an estimated price tag on that. And the other one was this trailer for the SCBA's for the bottles for the air. And with that, they made the argument about the cost to the fire districts growing slower because right now they've got to pay outsiders as a rental fee. If this is stuff that was owned within town, it would cost less to fill up these bottles and reduce their growing costs or reduce their cost overall. So it would be a benefit that can be spread out among the taxpayers in all the districts. And that's the same thing with the AEDs. It would benefit all the taxpayers in all the fire districts. You know, if you get into things like radios and that gets to one of the concerns that was raised previously of, are we benefiting some districts and not others? So I just wanted to put that back on the table, that if we went this route, that those were 2 things that would benefit everybody in all the fire districts. And even with the trailer idea, there's a revenue benefit to that in the long run. It reduces rental fees and all.
Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to put the ARPA discussion back on the agenda for the work session next time in 2 weeks, February 8th. So can you talk with your department heads that you chair and try to get them to get a plan together if they want to come to the work session, or if you want to present it for them when we're talking about ARPA. So with that being said, we do have to go into executive session with no action to follow to discuss TCSU and TCEA negotiations and the possible discipline of a particular employee. No action to follow. We're going there tonight. So could I get a second on that?
Second,
Councilmember Pilarski, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carried. So we're gonna get out of this meeting, go on to the executive session meeting now. Thank you, everyone.